This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warrenshaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. And as you're enjoying the NBA Finals, you know we got to continue to keep this thing moving. We got a couple of bodies that have been decaying in the medical examiner's office that's been due for an examination. You know, we got to continue to keep it pushing, man. So again, it's that coveted autopsy reports as we keep things moving along. We got two new bodies on the slab. I'm sorry, two overdue bodies on the slab. Let me go ahead and roll out the red carpet to my right-hand man's www.shawsports.net, Big Kahuna PNC. My man, Mr. Warren Shaw, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. What's good, Mr. Shaw? I know we've been preoccupied with everything going on with the NBA Finals and all, you know, the transactions that have been happening. But you know, listen, we needed a little bit of time. We needed a little bit of a reprieve. We need a little bit of smelling salt before we have to start getting up into these two. These are some two archaic, you know what I'm saying? Very traditional, old school teams that we got to get into, man. You know what I'm saying? They ain't brand new no more now. Like, they've been around the block a couple times.
You can say that again. You know, two of the more storied franchise here was in the Final Four, and both go out, I'd say, in disappointing fashion and in ways that were disappointing in very, very nuanced ways to, I think, each one of them specifically. But ultimately, you know, we are fans of one of these teams and had to take our own personal reprieve to kind of get our thoughts in order here on them. But at the end of the day, the Lakers and Celtics do not avoid the slab. They are up here, no matter how rotten they are currently. Lots to cover, lots to discuss as these two-story franchise with Hall of Fame level talents on their roster really are going to make for a great, interesting conversation. So I hope fans tune and listen to this one, man. It's going to be a good
Absolutely. And you know, listen, it ain't all that bad, Shaw. We giving them fresh dirt. we putting fresh dirt on them, right? Like, so they should not feel bad any way, shape, or form, man. You know what I'm saying?
Yes,
we believe in properly landscaping our teams. So listen, we appreciate you and yours for hopping on board with us this week. As always, be sure to get at my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA. Get at me at Game Face Lee. The show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline, available on all the major platforms. You know where to find us. As you can see, we ride out with our peoples from the 19 Media Group. So if you see 19 Media Group on the logo, know that the Baseline family is always in it to win it. Be sure to go to www.19mediagroup.com to check out our show and the litany of other shows that are out there. And if you want to catch our episode and all the other previous episodes of The Baseline, be sure to go to www.thebaselineNBA.com. So as Shaw has alluded to, we've got two teams that we're prepared to put on the slab. We're going to be talking about the Los Angeles Lakers and the Boston Celtics. You do not want to miss out on the insight and the whole evaluation process. And if we feel right about it, we may actually give them a proper eulogy as well, too. You don't want to miss out here on The Baseline. Time to break it down. The bone gristle. Time now for the breakdown. Callie Warrenshaw, Baseline NBA podcast, and this is our coveted autopsy report. We got two teams are putting on the slab. We're ready to examine and exhume. We're going to start off with the Los Angeles Lakers, not because we don't, you know, we hate them the most. I think, Shaw, it's good that we're going to actually start with the Los Angeles Lakers, because I think here, to me, the one thing that stands out to me about the Los Angeles Lakers is that they really truly represent a tale of two stories, right? The representation of what the Los Angeles Lakers were that started the season and what they finished with, as far as not even how things ended against the Denver Nuggets, but how much they have sort of evolved and morphed themselves into a much different identity. I think one of the questions that I wanted to ask you, and it's not something that would have been proper to ask after the way that they got beaten down by the Denver Nuggets, but more to the point about what you look at this team, you look at the roster, and you look at the mentality and the approach. Can you honestly say that this version of this version of the Lakers can actually give you a reason to see what this team should potentially look like. Like, in other words, are you able to see a blueprint of success now for the Los Angeles Lakers? Because we can honestly say that that's not what has happened really in the last 2-3 years. I think they even got away with what they potentially put together when they went and won the championship in the bubble. But I feel like part of that was because it's instantaneous championship success because of the pressure applied by LeBron James. He mandates and dictates that kind of narrative. And so you see the after effects when that can't hold and how long it takes in order to form what seems to be like a championship caliber basketball team. But I don't even know if we can say that just yet. But are we able to say that there's a blueprint of success for the Los Angeles Lakers given what they showed us the second half of this season?
Second half of the season, they were a completely different basketball team. Defense really kicked in. They were home warriors, really was able to defend, crypto.com, and just played team basketball. LeBron wasn't always the best player on the floor. And I think for him at age 38, that was probably a good thing where he can more or less try to pick his spots. But to answer your question, the problem is they have, let me look here, 3 guys under contract officially. They have Malik Beasley. He has a team option. They have Mo Bamba and they have Jared Vanderbilt. All those contracts are not guaranteed. So 3 guys who they for sure need to pay money to: LeBron, Anthony Davis, and Max Christie, of all players. So LeBron and AD already make up $90 million worth of that contract, or their salary cap. 90 million, bro. So when you're asking me like, hey, is the blueprint there? I mean, I guess so. I feel pretty strongly about those 2 guys being the cornerstones, if you will, of a short-term window for a championship. But Laker Nation in a lot of ways is, I want to say a little overly optimistic. And I know, Jeannie is going to go into the luxury tax. She thinks nothing about paying that and repeater tax and everything like that too. But I think it's really interesting when you only have that many players that are fully guaranteed. And then you're not sure about the other guys if you're going to bring those guys back too. D'Angelo's a free agent. Lonnie Walker's a free agent. Rui, who they got from Washington, is a free agent. Wayne Gabriel, Dennis Schroeder, Troy Brown Jr., Austin Reeves, who's going to be owed a massive increase in pay. Now, I think they'll do that for at least 3 of those guys to what you're saying. But at the end of the day, I'm a little concerned that, because if any of those players get wandering eyes and just say, you know what, this isn't the place I want to hitch my wagon to, LeBron going to be 39 years old, Anthony Davis, not the pillar of strength and health for the majority part of his career, maybe those guys want to go seek opportunities elsewhere. Or do they just say, you know what, we were close, I can still get a substantial payday, and we can run this thing back with this roster for the full year? That remains to be seen. And I'd be really interested now to see what Pelinka and Bus decide to do with that many free agents on the roster.
So yeah, so I asked the question. Maybe I should have asked it with a wink, wink, nod, nod, right? Like, what you saw from this team reminds me a lot like when Frank Vogel was the head coach, right? Now, I'm not saying this to diminish or dismiss Darvin Ham. Darvin Ham did exactly what I would think any coach in his position who simply wants to get these guys to play either up to their level or play to not be embarrassed, to play to win, to play with some sense of urgency, some sense of will to compete. He got them to do exactly what they were incapable of doing, even having a Hall of Fame player like LeBron James and a superstar player like Anthony Davis. And in the end, Shaw, I think the one thing that really sticks out at me is, from a strategic perspective, there's a blueprint of success. But from a personnel perspective, they are still going to run into the same problems that they've been running into since they won the championship. They don't have a reliable person who can help stabilize from a defensive perspective when you don't have full on AD on the court, or you don't have consistent AD playing in critical games for every single game that you're competing in the playoffs. And to your point, you don't have LeBron James as LeBron James 35. You don't have LeBron James 34, 33, or younger. You're getting an older, more savvier version of LeBron James. So it amuses me when you hear a lot of the mainstream um, commentators and analysts say, well, we need LeBron James to take over games. We need LeBron James to go in and drop four, as if that is something that's just supposed to happen out of nowhere, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's not what goes down. And that's never been LeBron James. LeBron James is the reason why he is considered one of the greatest players of all time is not just because of he'll just go out there and get you 40. It's he is what Nikola Jokic is right now for us, right? He is the kind of person where even if he doesn't give you 40, he somehow is involved in almost every conceivable play that impacts the game, like he scored 40, like he scored 55. He has a key block, he has a key steal, he has a key pass, he has a key rebound. Everything with him evolves around there being a key. It's hard to do that when other players who are assuming those certain intangibles that are already a given if you had that type of LeBron James available to you, you're not seeing that from all of those guys. So I asked that question because it's amazing to me, Shaw, that the simplicity of it is saying if you have the way that the Lakers play to get themselves in this position, that type of personnel and that type of consistency from that type of personnel, there's no question this would be a championship caliber basketball team. But this situation reared its ugly head when you saw that you couldn't see the consistency of these guys in their ability to perform in that kind of way unless the matchups are so favorable that tilts their way, that if they played against someone that is maybe younger than them, maybe they've got more bodies to throw at them, that they can't hold their own. And so to your point, it brings back the question of you only got 3 guys that are contracted on your roster right now. If you can't hold even the guys that you have now with this type of climate that's going on in the NBA, who are you going out there to get that's going to replace what gave you what you got to get to that point, which was the Western Conference Finals this past season?
So to me, they also have a little bit of again, I hate to use this word, it's the only one that's coming up right now, but a little bit of a culture problem, somewhat in, do you want to give in to LeBron again? Right. And it's really interesting to see the genesis of ideation here from Laker Nation, if you will. At one point when this run was going well, it was reported out that the Lakers were more than likely going to keep D'Angelo Russell. Right. And he fell off a cliff, especially in the Western Conference Finals. Did not look well. Now Kyrie Irving is showing up to games. He's on the sidelines, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We all know what's going on, potentially what's going on in his contract in Dallas. And LeBron and Kyrie have been flirting around together. If you are Pelinka and company, do you now say, what? Let's go back and do this again. LeBron wants Kyrie. LeBron wants whoever LeBron wants. Or do you go back to your most recent history here where you're like, you know what? I constructed a team. I'm speaking as Pelinka now. I constructed a team that got us to the Western Conference Finals, negating what LeBron ultimately wanted when he wanted us to bring in Westbrook and other parts. So to me, I think it's, do you go with the aging potential best player of all time and kind of catering and bending to his whims and needs? Or do you go with what you think is ultimately best that will help him, but also help you? And when you're talking about who's going to come in here now, the Lakers always are big game hunting. That's what they do. But I don't know if that's the mode of operation here with whoever that may be. I'm not saying it's Kyrie. I don't know who it is, but I would probably more likely like to see them bring back the majority of those guys, especially Rui, especially Austin Reeves, and some of the other, even let Obama try to work his way back into the situation a little bit. And then if you feel like you need an upgrade at point guard, I think there are other names out there besides Kyrie Irving that you could probably look at, but I don't have faith that that's not what they'll do. I think it's just LeBron kind of always gets his way to the most part. And I'm not trying to say anything negative about him in his capacity. Like, that's just a cost of doing business when you have him on your roster. That's just what it is. But I think Pelinka has to kind of thread the needle here, toe the line on what exactly that's going to look like, especially as LeBron creeps up to age 40.
Well, so let me add on top of that to your point, because I was chomping at the bit when you mentioned Kyrie Irving's name, because obviously that's what's floating around. There's another side to that equation, Shaw, that has to be asked. If you were to do that, if you're Rob Pelinka, what are you telling Anthony Davis, right? Let's not act like we don't hear the chirpers out there. We don't hear what's being, the elephant in the room is Anthony Davis the real deal? And guess what? When you are a big playing for the Los Angeles Lakers, you've got a lot of heavy lifting, right? We've seen what happened to Dwight Howard. He got ate up by not just the Laker nation, but more importantly, by his own teammates. Because everyone on the outside lauded him to be the next Wilt Chamberlain, to be the next Shaquille O'Neal, right? To be the next Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, to usher in that level of dominance at the 5 position. Anthony Davis was brought in to not only quell that, and for the most part, the bubble actually accelerated the hype about what he should potentially give Lakers Nation, right? Next to LeBron James. They should be getting multiple championships. But we've been saying this for the longest time. If he cannot stay healthy, how can you properly evaluate the length of that success? Especially if you have a person like LeBron James who is mandating and dictating really all of the supplemental parts around you. You know what I mean? So now, okay, fine. You go and you get Kyrie Irving. What does Kyrie Irving do for an Anthony Davis? I'm finding a hard time to find that, Shaw. I really am. If nothing else, Kyrie Irving, and I'm not saying that Kyrie Irving is going to be a cancer. I'm not saying Kyrie Irving is bad for the. I'm just saying Kyrie Irving's skill set does exactly what for Anthony Davis, right? If at the very least Anthony Davis doesn't replicate the level of greatness that people have, now he becomes the scapegoat. Now he becomes the person that all of a sudden there's that level of ungratefulness that is being shown towards. How is that helpful for the Los Angeles Lakers? And ultimately, this is about winning championships. You know what I'm saying? Let's not act like Anthony Davis will not be vastly affected by this and be like, I don't need to be a part of this. You know what I'm saying? I got you people you're chipping. You're still not happy? I can go elsewhere and still get my bag. You know what I'm saying? And you never hear that from any of the bigs that play for the Los Angeles Lakers. So this is a no-win situation for Anthony Davis. But part of it is his fault because even when he is healthy and is on the court, he doesn't consistently play to the level that we all think that he is capable of being. And now that he is basically he's at the 30-year mark, right? So I'm not saying he's done the downside of his career. But what I'm saying is that it doesn't get any easier from here for him. So that to me is just what sticks out more than anything when you have certain moves that may potentially be made and who actually factors over those type of players, who has that voice in a room to say whether that it's a good or a bad thing when you're putting together that roster.
I'll just kind of close on this because the Kyrie thing is not a for sure situation.
Right. No, absolutely.
However, I will say that it's interesting because in some ways it could help AD offensively. If AD is now a glorified number 3, 2B-ish offensive option, then he focuses on the defense and rebounding where he can be absolutely dominant. I think where he's gotten into trouble more so recently with Laker fans and perceptions of his capabilities is having to try to score and do all those things offensively and defensively. If he has to score, I don't know, 18 to 21 points per game, something along those lanes instead of 25 to 27 a game or whatever. Now, because a talent like Kyrie is there, somebody of that ilk, so to speak, maybe that helps. But again, what happens with the rest of the roster? And I think that's the question regardless, right? So I think my question kind of going back to you is, Darvin Ham, it's kind of a tale of two seasons. So like what they did pre-All-Star and trade deadline is almost kind of irrelevant. They're a completely different team from that. We have to kind of use that as the benchmark here now. Our guy Jabari Davis, he sings the praises, and everybody's singing the praises of one Austin Reeves. And I'll never forget, game 1 of the playoffs versus the Memphis Grizzlies. He's walking around screaming that he is him. Well, I thought that was a little much for my taste. He's a very good basketball player. And I will not disrespect, I think, his overall skill set. The him stuff, too far. But at the
Who
end
do
of
you
the
think
day,
you are? I am. I'm sorry.
but where do you think
Weapon
again?
moment. I'm sorry.
Where do you rate Darvin Ham's first season, especially after that, and then overall the value of Austin Reeves, who might I just think I saw a report here he might get to be on Team USA this summer. Just again by virtue of some of the great basketball play that he had, especially in the playoffs here. Where do you rate Austin Reeves and Darvin Ham in their seasons as Lakers?
So you want me to what? Give you a grade or just?
However, just
uh,
just your great thoughts, whatever.
I think Austin Reeves had himself a remarkable season. I think it's been a while since you have quote unquote homegrown talent come in and have as much impact for the Los Angeles Lakers um, since their free agency moves. And I think you'd be remiss if you're the Los Angeles Lakers to allow that to go somewhere else. I will say this though, because I saw this become more evident, and then I'll move on to Darvin Ham real quick. Austin Reeves presents a very interesting conundrum because it lends to the thing that we were just talking about in relation to Anthony Davis and how you were relating to having, Kyrie Irving could probably help Anthony Davis. I think in the long term, Austin Reeves will be a detriment to Anthony Davis. Listen, at the end of the day, given the way the Lakers play, given the way LeBron is playing, Anthony Davis is going to have to play the 5. And he don't want to play the 5.
He
But if
did
you
though. He
want,
did it all this year.
he did a lot. But to the point that I'm saying, Shaw, there has to be an interior presence that I think LeBron James wants to kind of move further and further away from. I think that Anthony Davis over the years is starting to move further and further away from that paint. So then my question is, who you going to get down there? Who's going to do the dirty work down there? You can't tell me that it's going to be Austin Reeves. Either Austin Reeves is going to be your 2 guard, or he's playing that 3, and LeBron is back to playing that 4, right? To me, no matter how you slice it, I think it's going to come down to that long question for Anthony Davis. Will you ever be comfortable playing that 5? Because the way that LeBron wants this team structured, if you want shooters, it's going to require him to be away from that basket a lot. So you got to get guys that are going to be willing to score that basketball, either get down and penetrate. But I don't know if Anthony Davis is going to be acquiesced to that part of it. That's the reason why I say that's how great of a season Austin Reeves has, because he presents that as could be a good problem if you're Rob Pelinka. Now over to Darvin Ham. Darvin Ham, to me, is exactly what the Los Angeles Lakers needs, right? They needed a coach that knows how to talk to the players, but more importantly, talk to the management. And no filter, no sugarcoat, and no kiss ass. The only thing that I've seen that was a falter for Darvin Ham was his inability to really use the roster that he had as in a way that could allow him the best matchups at certain times when there were no matchups. Sometimes you just got to throw a shot in the dark. And sometimes I think he kind of pulled his punches a little bit because he's really relying on LeBron James and Anthony Davis to try to take them home, which, look, like any good coach would typically do. The problem is that when you've got teams that are better with more depth, you know what I'm saying? You can't just rely on the fact that even if your guys aren't going, you just suddenly don't play your guys. You're going to have to play them. So there's certain adjustments that Darvin Ham could totally make that I think would lend himself to be an even better coach. And that will come with time. What I'm hoping doesn't happen is he doesn't rest on his laurels knowing that he's got Anthony Davis and LeBron James, and that stymies that progression that he has to make, making offensive adjustments and holding players defensively accountable. Because if there's one thing that I know Darvin Ham wants these guys to work on, they have got to be better on transitional defense. The Los Angeles Lakers are the absolute worst team in basketball when it comes to transitional defense. And I don't need to look at no numbers. Time and time again, the Los Angeles Lakers looked like they were dragging mules every single time that they shot a brick and could not get back to the other side of the floor to defend fast breaks. Some of the slowest teams looked like freaking looking like coyotes and hyenas and foxes up and down the court against the Los Angeles Lakers because their transitional defense was atrocious. So I would like to see Darvin Ham put more emphasis on the things that they can definitely improve on defensively, but I'd love to see him make more adjustments from an offensive perspective as well, too, when matchups don't favor his superstars.
I'll kind of like round it out here a little bit, with ultimately everybody needs to be better, right? And I think Ham as a first year coach can definitely take some cues. We'll talk about another first year coach here on the flip side here, and kind of just understanding where your team is at, where your roster is at. And he is as much of a fan, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but he's as much of a fan as LeBron as any coach I think he's ever had.
Right.
And it's really interesting how he kind of plays that in a way that resonates to positivity. I don't think LeBron disrespects him or looks down on him. I think Ham has the appropriate level of reverence for LeBron while still maintaining the line as being the head coach, who also ultimately has to make some of the hard decisions out there. But this Lakers team does have to figure out now, who are they going to also develop alongside the twilight of LeBron's career? And, in this whole conversation, we haven't even given any credence to LeBron's, messaging that he might consider retirement, anything like that too. I don't think either one of us is buying that. So no need to even go into the conversation. But ultimately now this roster is not void of talent, but is void of contracts. And I think that's what it boils down to. How many of these guys do you bring back? And for those who you don't, who are the replacements that you get in to supplement? Because I think you've seen now a formula that got them to a certain level of success this past season, where they did play hard defense. They got a little bit more shooting around the edges, so to speak, and AD had to kind of lock in defensively and be that anchor for them. I think that's their formula. Can these guys come back and expand on the success that they had in the latter part of the season, but ultimately fell short? But again, if a championship is the goal, and we know that it is, tweaks had to be made because they got swept by the Denver Nuggets, swept. So there's no two ways about that. As good as it was, getting swept in the Western Conference Finals is not where you want to be, at the end of the day.
How the game ended, I think, spoke more. You know, I'm sorry, like as much as I love LeBron James and the idea that I would want the ball in his hands, I didn't see anything about that play that was designed, and even the shot that he probably would have taken that would have gave me any confidence that we're going to win that basketball game. So to that point, Shaw, that's what I mean about the evolution of Darvin Ham. Really putting together and relying on the players that he's ultimately coaching and developing. There's two players I'm going to throw this out before we end this segment that I want to see what happens in the offseason, and I want to see what takes place. There are two players that I think is going to really have benefit from having Darvin Ham as a head coach. And I don't know if you agree with me on this one, but follow me here. Jared Vanderbilt and Rui Hachimura. If Rui Hachimura really understands the defensive principles that are necessary for him as part of that second unit, watch for him to be really taking another step forward. I think offensively he can get better, and you can always do that playing around LeBron James. Whoever they get as a top flight point guard, or even if you figure out a way to bring back Dennis Schroeder, I think he thrives with those type of guards. But I would love to see Darvin Ham have his imprint on Rui Hachimura's ability to play better defensively. Jared Vanderbilt, I would love to see more discipline from him, because he could be one of those Swiss Army knife two-way type players that could really serve a great purpose for the Los Angeles Lakers. And so, if nothing else, I know that the key is about keeping Austin Reeves, and I know that you got to worry about a whole rest of other guys and stuff like that. But if for whatever reason they don't figure out a way to make sure that Vanderbilt and Hachimura is on this roster, that to me is a telltale sign of things not looking right for the Los Angeles Lakers on how they're going to be able to make up for what those guys contributed and gave the Lakers that second half of the season. And I think that part of that is Darvin Ham's ability to channel and speak to those guys, to have them have an imprint on their run, even though they got ousted by the Denver Nuggets.
Yeah, so Vanderbilt's going to have to work on the corner three specifically.
Yes,
I
absolutely.
think what he does defensively is very, very, very positive on most nights, but he's not even PJ Tucker right now. He's
Right.
really
Oh,
bad,
absolutely.
from the corner three spot. So that just so that he can not be a liability offensively. And I think your point about Rui is as well. Rui has a chance to start next year. depending how the rest of this roster ultimately fills out, he has a chance to start at that 3-4. I guess he and LeBron would be kind of interchangeable at those two positions. So I don't think they make the move for him mid-season, or like even a little bit before mid-season, and without the intention to keep him. So I think if there's one guy who's coming back, it's ultimately going to be him. I can't imagine that they would not guarantee Vanderbilt's contract, so I think he'll be back as well too. And we already talked about some of the others, especially with Reeves and what they're going to pay him. I think it's just going to come down to the number. Reeves is probably going to, 18, somewhere to 18 to 22 million per year. You probably have to pay that guy, and that puts you well into the tax. So as you're trying to probably get a third quote unquote star or whatever that looks like, it'll be interesting to see how they do the cap gymnastics here to manage that. So Lakers, good season overall, came back from the depths of hell. They were the laughing stock, memes, and the whole nine, all the way to the Western Conference Finals, ultimately get swept by the Denver Nuggets. But a lot of teams wish they could have even been in that situation. So shout out to the Lakers for turning their season around.
Yeah, man. Listen, we're not burying you with just dirt. We're giving you some roses as well, too. You would definitely be getting your flowers. Los Angeles Lakers, they're going to have a very, very interesting offseason. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA, our coveted autopsy report. Coming up, we'll be talking about the Boston Celtics. I know we've been gearing up to talk about this team, man. But trust me, I don't think you want to walk away from what we have to say about the Boston Celtics on our autopsy report. But first, if you're looking for the ultimate destination for NBA gear, look no further than the NBA store. With a huge selection of authentic and high-quality products, including jerseys, hats, and accessories, the NBA store has everything you need to show off your team pride. Plus, with exclusive and limited edition items, you can make your collection truly one of a kind. And with an online presence, you can shop from anywhere in the world. Don't miss out on the latest trends and experiences. Visit the NBA store today by clicking our affiliate link. If you're listening to us on your favorite audio platform, be sure to check the link in the description of the show. The Baseline is working in affiliation with the NBA store /Fanatics and will be compensated for your patronage by utilizing our link. That's nbastore.vwz6.net/baseline. Once again, that's nbastore.v as in Victor, W as in Washington, Z as in Zebra, 6.net/baseline. And as always, we thank you for your support. Celtics, Shaw, Lee, Baseline coming up. We are back, Callie Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA podcast, and we are in our coveted autopsy report. Got one more team that's on the slab, and that will be the Boston Celtics, a team, Shaw, that a lot of people favored to be the top team out of the Eastern Conference. They weren't able to sustain being the first team, and clearly from the way that they ran the playoffs, you almost said to yourself, they're like really the last most talented team, but by no stretch of the imagination did you feel that they were the best team in the NBA, even though with basically the same roster that a year ago removed was competing and playing for an NBA championship. And it's just funny how a tumultuous offseason, I guess if you want to call it, with the situation with Ime Udoka has such an effect that by bringing in a interim / assistant head coach to coach the team throughout the course of the year, you have more questions than answers about this team, even though they got to the Eastern Conference Finals, only to find themselves watching from the outside looking in.
Yeah, it didn't go the way a lot of us would have thought it would have went for Boston. Felt like they addressed all of their proverbial needs from a roster standpoint, especially with bringing in Brogdon. He ultimately wins Sixth Man of the Year. Jaylen Brown makes third team All NBA. And things really seemed like this was a team of destiny in a wide open NBA season. But ultimately, the changes at the top with the head coach and Joe Mazzulla kind of coming in and looking very inexperienced in the Eastern Conference Finals for the majority part of that series, then the team having a lot of its old skeletons come out of those closets. They get the yips. They're unable to execute when things get tight. They turn the ball over, and they didn't play the same level of defense that they did under Udoka. And ultimately ran into a buzzsaw with the Miami Heat team that was chomping at the bit to get back at them for losing in the Eastern Conference Finals the season ago. And I think it was almost to the day where they lost Game 7, the Heat did, and they come back, I think, a year later and win Game 7 on Boston's home floor.
I mean,
So
this is the first time we actually would have to put on a tombstone. May 29th, 2023. Here lies the Boston Celtics.
Wow. Yeah, the Memorial Day massacre, really, in a lot of ways. So for me, what ends up happening now is they go into the off season. Brad Stevens has already come out and endorsed Mazzulla. The thing that needs to happen, I think, first and foremost, is they need to bolster the assistant coaches around Mazzulla. They're not going to fire him. They owe him too much money. They've already given them the contract. They're not going to do that. So can they get some top name assistants? We'll talk about this on another show, but coaches are being hired all around the league right now, and assistant jobs are being taken up by top level guys who were once head coaches going into associate roles. I know Boston is quote unquote fresh out, but they've really got to look at to see what's available for them, to kind of help Mazzulla on the sidelines. And I think the biggest thing is because seems to have an interesting personality where things might grate, I think, with certain people. So they have to bring in the right fit. I don't know if you can bring in a head coach that's maybe won an NBA championship and put him alongside Mazzulla, because I think there might be some clashing there. That's just my assessment of it. No intel on this. The rest of the team now, the rest of the roster now boils down to what do they do with Grant Williams? Do they feel Brogdon at $22 million or really $44 million over the next 2 years is the answer? Even though he was sixth man of the year, he became a glorified 3-point shooter. He didn't penetrate in the way, he didn't create in the way that he did in previous seasons. And while he was a sixth man of the year, I think Boston was looking for more. And yes, he was hurt in the playoffs, but I think those are the biggest questions here as they go into this. Yes, a lot of conversation about Jaylen Brown. I'm not as concerned. You can talk about it if you are, but I know people are like, oh, well, is Jaylen Brown going to leave Boston? He's got supermax money on the table, and history has shown us that guys don't turn that down.
Right.
I have nothing else. He resigns, maybe he asks for a trade 2 years from now, but I think at least for the next 2 years, he's probably going to be in a Celtic uniform. That's the way I see it, without getting, too venomous, about my actual feelings about it. That's just kind of the 30,000 foot overview of the Celtics and how they ended up their season.
All right, so let me go back to your first original point regarding Joe Mazzulla. It's interesting, Shaw, that you bring up Joe Mazzulla and the type of person that he is, and maybe the type of personality that he kind of exudes upon people. I think the Celtics losing Damon Stoudemire was kind of key, and I think it kind of also speaks the unspoken truth about something, right? Like Damon Stoudemire is choosing to leave the NBA to go and coach college basketball, I believe, right? So
Georgia Tech.
Yeah, so my thing is, a lot of guys want to leave college basketball to coach in the NBA. You know what I'm saying? And if Damon Stoudemire doesn't want to be a part of a herald franchise like the Boston Celtics, and I'm not saying that the Celtics had to bend over backwards or didn't try or nothing like that. What I'm saying is that the timing of it really felt kind of sketch. You know what I'm saying? Because it could be, to Damon's point, I see my career, my voice better suited coaching younger guys, talking to younger guys, right? This team is more veteran laden now, even though they're relatively among the youngest in the NBA when you have Tatum and Brown. So I'm just saying, to me, that, to your point, is the selling point of what type of assistant head coaches are you going to be able to bring in that's going to be able to talk to both Tatum and Brown and some of the other younger guys that are still on this roster that the Celtics are going to have to make sure that they keep, right? So that's one thing.
Well, before you jump into the next one, I'll just say, Steven said specifically that they need to address that. And almost to your exact point, in terms of they need to bring somebody with NBA playing experience. So Stoudemire had that, could relate to Tatum and Brown and everybody, and saying, hey, I've been here, seen some of these things before. And that is something that they said, well, they're going to get multiple assistants, and one of them will be somebody who has NBA playing experience, obviously, because Mazzulla doesn't have that.
Yeah. And again, I'm just throwing that part of it out there because it's just highlighting to what you were talking about before.
Yes, sir.
All right. So let me now move over to Malcolm Brogdon. I wasn't going to talk about Brogdon, but you really brought up an interesting point about Malcolm Brogdon. I completely agree with you. While and I was the biggest skeptic, I wasn't buying into the idea that I thought that the move of Brogdon was the best move. But remember when we sat down, we had that one episode when we discussed about the Boston Celtics and what we enjoyed about seeing about the Boston Celtics and what we applauded seeing from the Celtics. But the one thing that I think had always been sticking out at me is while I love the fact that Brogdon brings that an element that I thought was sorely lacking, once the starters went to the bench, the second units didn't have consistent scoring, didn't have a guy that can get in there and really kind of dictate what the Celtics truly need to either stabilize or to put the foot on the neck against the opponents and stuff. Malcolm Brogdon was showing you that he could be that dude. And somehow all of that went away. Somehow all of that just kind of just poof, in thin air. Okay. I agree with you. He became a three happy guy. But you know what? So did the whole damn team, right? The whole Boston Celtics team just basically became three happy. And even in a situation where they could show you they can basically be a mid-range team or a team that can drive and penetrate and get three the easy. People say three the hard way. I say three the easy way. They choose not to do it. It's not the teams scheme and plot and do things differently. They choose not to do it, and they go right back to shooting the threes. And so I agree with you, Shaw, that if that is the mentality that your sixth man of the year guy approaches when he really needs to be better, especially at the point guard position, when he needs to, hey, whoa, guys, we need to get back into getting into the paint. We need to get those mid-range games, or we need to move the ball more. If he's not going to be that guy that's going to be able to do that, then I completely agree with you. You may have to revisit the idea of whether or not Brogdon is going to be the key or going to be the answer. You know what I'm saying? For this Boston Celtics team, especially with the way that it's already constructed, which now leads me to the Jaylen Brown situation. I don't disagree with you, Shaw, and I'm not going to belabor the point. My sentiment and my feeling about Jaylen Brown is this. I think Jaylen Brown is an awesome player. I think Jaylen Brown believes that he's an awesome player. And the thing that I'm beginning to see and what I've been seeing over the last couple of years that is starting to kind of bring the bigger question in the room, who wants to be the top dog for the Boston Celtics? And you know what? It should never even get to that. Because if you're coming up the same way that both of these guys came up, there's more than enough ball for them both to be the quintessential pillars for this team to be as successful as they ought to be. But I'm beginning to see where a little bit of that mentality and that mind state, and I don't blame Jaylen Brown. I don't blame him at all. You don't come into the NBA so that you can decide to be second fiddle to someone. You decide to find your level of greatness. And if you feel your level of greatness can't be around the guys you're playing next to, then that might mean you need to go elsewhere to go find your greatness. The question will always be, do you sacrifice that personal level of greatness in order for you to win a championship? Or do you go and get your greatness and then later on decide to go and play with teams to try and go and chase for chips? You know what I'm saying? And we've seen where some guys have failed and we've seen where some guys have succeeded. All I'm saying, Shaw, is that there's a reckoning that is starting to happen. And part of it is not more so about the player and the money as much as it is about the mentality and the agenda. And that's what I think Celtics fans, Celtics personnel, and even Jaylen Brown himself really need to start looking at. Because the next few years, I really think is going to dictate whether or not we truly believe. Like, I'm not saying that they're not a great duo. What I'm saying is that the window for that level of greatness has been over the last 5 years. And we've been giving them not excuses, but we've been basically giving them the benefit of the doubt of their youthfulness to say they will eventually get it. I'm saying that now that patience may wear thin enough that the threading for them to be able to re-up and do this again may not have the same effect as when they were 19, 20 years old and first coming up along in the Celtics organization.
Well, you said a mouthful, obviously, and I'm going to take you all the way back to the 3-point shooting. That was Mazzulla. Mazzulla wanted them to fire more threes. He felt like offensively they were stagnant at the end of last year and didn't have enough. And they thought the three ball could be a way to get that get that done. Unfortunately for them, guys like Sam Hauser and whatever maybe didn't plan out the way they wanted to, but Mazzulla also didn't put him in a position to contribute, I think, in the playoffs, to continue with that whole mantra. And the Celtics lost Gallinari to begin the year. Don't know what the season would have looked like had Gallo been healthy, and what the situation will be with him, presumably healthy going into next season. Al Horford is a guy. Gary Washburn told me this, on the show I do with him. He said, but Al Horford now shoots almost 70% of his shots from the 3-point line, 70%. And when he came into the league, I think it was less than 10% of his shots were 3-pointers. Now, obviously the league has evolved, and so has Al in a lot of ways, but there should still be a happy median. And I think that's where the team does lack a little bit of discipline, because they just go and just camp out at that 3-point line. And what will bring me to my point here is, it's in some ways I can live with the threes if the ball isn't just swinging around on the perimeter. The best threes are the ones where the ball touches the paint and the ball kicks back out, and the defense is consistently rotating in and out. What you see with Boston is maybe 4 guys out on the perimeter and maybe 1 guy kind of straggling, maybe at the low block, if that's Rob Williams in the game, or maybe somebody straggles at the free throw line. But for the most part, there's not just a lot of penetration, a lot of great paint touches, especially with Tatum and Brown not having the handle that either one of them ultimately want to have for all NBA guys. So what I think also needs to happen for this team is, we know Peyton Pritchard doesn't want to be in Boston. Grant Williams, we're not sure wants to be in Boston, but he definitely wants a pay raise. Can they figure out a way to get a guy who can actually penetrate? And I don't know if that's another guard, because it does create another logjam with Marcus there and Derek White, et cetera, et cetera. But is it a wing who has some sort of playmaking skills and ball handling ability? I don't know. But those are the things that I think Boston needs to ultimately address.
I've never seen a group of guys be so scared to go into the paint, bro. Like, I say that, not, I'm saying that facetiously. I'm saying,
I mean, when they do, they get ripped.
So. Yeah, but I mean that's fine. But I mean that's exactly where you earn your stripes. That's where that's where Derek White earned his keep, right? He stays in the NBA because he's doing the things that I think a lot of people don't think that he's capable of doing or is not expected to do when he goes and he does those things. And that, to me, is partly what I thought that the Celtics needed. To your point, the Celtics have done a great job this year showing other teams how they can bail them out of looking bad by them looking bad themselves. You know what I'm saying? I mean, honestly, the turnovers, Shaw, seriously, bro. I'm not saying that the Celtics were among the best teams in turning the ball over. That's what killed them last year in the championship. Okay. But it wasn't like this is out of nowhere. This is learned behavior. This is the risk taking that is involved. And we see that with a lot of teams. They're willing to risk turning the ball over a couple of times if it's going to give them that quote unquote the shot. It's going to give them that spark. It's going to give them that run. They'll take that all day, every day. The problem is they don't have a plan B out of that. They don't have a contingency out of it when it flips on its head and then it basically becomes a 7-point swing in a 2-point game. You see what I'm saying? Like that type of stuff. There doesn't seem to be a plan B when it comes to the Celtics. It's either all in on this one part of the strategy or nothing at all. And you cannot operate that way. The best teams that go out and win championships always have a plan B, C, D, E, and F. That's how the Warriors beat the Celtics last year. That's how the Miami Heat beat the Celtics this year. That's how the Denver Nuggets beat the Los Angeles Lakers. You know what I'm saying? And it's amazing to me because we've been saying this for the longest time now with the Celtics. And in this past series against the Miami Heat, Shaw, it was staring at them right in the face. Everybody was talking about how they shot 40% in the games that they won from 3. But nobody put emphasis on the fact that they were shooting, except for Charles Barkley. My God, Charles Barkley, they shot 70% in the paint. They were plus 15 in rebounds. But by the time the game ended, they were in the negative, right, in their rebounding against the team, or they completely abandoned shooting the 2, and their 3-point shot percentage plummeted down to the low 30s. You know what I'm saying? It amazes me, Shaw. I'm just saying it amazes me because it's not like the personnel doesn't have the capacity to at least attempt to do it when they were completely doing it.
Well, you might be being generous again. the 3-point shooting, I think they were
Is
something
that
like
being generous? Okay.
16 for 72 or something like that in the final 2 games from the 3 line. Horford didn't look
I
at
was
the
only talking
rim.
about the games that they won. I was only talking about the games they won.
No, I'm saying in the final 2 games, though, more or less, even that they won one of those games and then still lost, and they were still like absurd percentage. And I agree, but that goes back to scheme. And so when we think about, Darvin Ham got better throughout the course of the year with a flawed roster. We talked about the Lakers on the previous segment. I think Mazzulla had a talented roster and didn't probably do as much as he possibly could. And that's hard to say because, again, I listened intently to what Brad Stevens talked about on his press conference. And in the regular season, Boston was second and third, respectively, offensive rating and defensive rating. I mean, that's what it was. But in the playoffs, there was a different level of intensity that they weren't unable to match. And, they should have lost probably to Philadelphia 76ers. They probably should have lost game 6 and not even been in game 7 against the Miami Heat anyway. And that speaks to not just a talent conversation, but ultimately an execution conversation that I think is really at the heart of where Boston is going to go. But there are some X's and O's that need to be fixed. And there are also personnel conversations that I think that need to be fixed as well too, and role definement in some ways. I don't think Tatum and Brown being playmakers consistently is the best way for them. I think you can move Tatum and Brown specifically around on the offense, especially in that zone against Miami or whoever decides to play zone against them moving forward. Yo, play pop a shot. My guy Gary Osborne said, have Tatum come to the free throw line to the nail, pop a shot. Have him start from the free throw, from the baseline and work his way up and, do some back screening and cuts for for Brown rather. There doesn't just have to be on the wings outside the perimeter and then go. And I think that's where the Celtics got a little bit foolhardy.
How come at this point we have not seen an affluent 2-man game between Brown and Tatum?
Because they can't dribble. So it take like to run that 2-man game, especially if you're going to run it in any type of pick and roll. Those guys need to be elite level ball handlers. And while Tatum's handle has gotten better, it's not at the point where I think he should be creating, off the dribble, especially with Brown as a screener in any capacity.
Do you find it to be good passers?
They're adequate. Tatum is a better passer than Brown is, right? I think they're above average and they're better than maybe even I give them credit for. Tatum has had multiple games where he really seems to get some guys involved, and because he can utilize his size. His problem is when he gets into trouble, double teamed and triple teams, he should see that coming before now he has to make a bad pass, make the initial pass, and maybe you don't have to get into some of those situations. But I think that's something that they can both probably improve on. But to me, it's the handle. They got to be able to get better dribbling, or they need better table setters for them to get them in motion as opposed to for them having to create themselves.
Yeah. So how do we eulogize this Boston Celtics team, Shaw? They to me are probably the toughest to eulogize because it's not about the expectation that they, of them going to the finals. Like we were talking about when we were watching this series against the Miami Heat, I would have just preferred that they just got blown out in the water and got swept, so that this way I could be honest about my feelings in saying that this team is still not ready, even though I wanted them to be ready. And it would have validated that really it was all about that second half hype that got them to this particular point. But when you see what they showed you through the course of the regular season, and I know that part of it is the mentality, their approach to how they should be looking at this. The one thing that really sticks out at me when I think about the Celtics, Shaw, is that they don't have that killer instinct. They have preservation in them. They have this level of, yeah, we deserve to be in that conversation. I think we deserve to be here, but they don't have that killer instinct. They don't have like that to me that I'm going to put my foot on somebody's neck. They seem to still keep playing with their food, bro. And that to me is the thing that disturbs me when you've got guys as talented as this. You got guys who say that, they've sat down and had conversations with Kobe Bryant and, they lean on all of it. All of that means nothing because in the grand scheme of things, what you do is don't allow teams who you have been playing against over the last 3-4 years expose you even further to where you are, not even in your talents, but more so in your approach to how you see the competition.
Well, it was a collective failure. I think top down. If you're going to, I'll do these quick glancing blows, if you will. I think Stevens probably had a misstep by only getting Mike Muscala at the trade deadline. Muscala was a non-factor. They needed another wing. And with the way second round picks were going at the deadline and for depth that Celtics obviously clearly needed, they probably should have did more there too. Obviously, we talked about them not getting more assistance there, and Mazzulla didn't do enough. First year coach in a highly volatile situation. So he'll get better, but he needs support. And I think the players themselves, as you alluded to, I think that's a great line. They do have preservation skills, but that killer instinct has never really been there for them. And as much as we love and laud Tatum and Brown, there's another level to this. There's a dog level to this that they just are not quite at yet. And nobody on the team is. So they just try to do it by overall team talent and chemistry and front run so that they don't have to kind of look themselves in the mirror and kind of dig themselves out when things get really, really, really rough. Once things starts to go off the rails, they've had a hard time kind of riding the ship. But again, it's not necessarily a roster thing as it is a kind of an internal situation. So when you're properly utilizing them, I look at a team that has $163 million in contracts committed. They got to figure out what they're doing with Grant Williams. And if not, then, how does that replace? How does Gallinari come back if he comes back next year? And what role does he play? But this roster is pretty much landlocked for a little while here now. And I think it's a matter of, can they get over the proverbial hump? And fortunately / unfortunately for them, the last 2 years saved Tatum's ankle injury to begin the Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals. They've been mostly healthy. Can you count on that year over year? And I don't know that you can, especially with the way the things are changing and everybody else is trying to improve and get better. I think they have a long road ahead of them. This should have been their year, and it wasn't. And they're going to look themselves in the mirror and really regret, this 2023 season.
Soul searching, right? Soul searching. I mean, this team definitely needs to do some serious soul searching. Don't come have us look for their soul. You know what I'm saying? We not them boys. We got white jackets on. We don't want us coming searching for their souls, right? So they need to find them. They need to find their souls themselves, and hopefully there will be a better version of the Boston Celtics. They'll be right back where they were this time around, but it'll be interesting to see what version of them comes into that, Eastern, quote unquote, Eastern Conference Finals. If they get to that point, will they be able to truly appreciate the difficulties and how hard it is to be able to do this for as long as they've been doing it and finally see this thing through? And I think the only way that you're going to see that is you see that maturation through the course of the regular season. People poo-poo the regular season. It's too many games. It's that and the third. The regular season is exactly the reason why it is, because you begin to see what the team truly manifests itself after going through all of that, of what they're going to need in order to get to that next level, to take that next level. And it's ironic that the one team that everybody completely counted out was the one team that exposed their soul 1 year to the date of what they did to them in return. Awesome. You couldn't have written it better. It's just awesome. And we thank you, the Miami Heat. We ought to probably bring the Miami Heat medical examiners in the next time we start doing these autopsy reports.
We'll see them soon.
We'll see them soon. Oh man, this has been an awesome show, Shaw. We've been, it's been a little touch and go, man. Even our technology was on the you know what I'm saying, was flatlining a little bit. We somehow made it work, and we pulled it through to be able to properly autopsy the Lakers and the Celtics.
Yeah. The longer this goes, I was crossing my fingers. Hopefully my Wi-Fi didn't give out, but the internet gods that said, go ahead and eulogize, these Boston Celtics and this Los Angeles Lakers
they're
team.
Probably Nuggets fans. They were probably Nuggets fans.
Do it one time for the podcast industry. So as always, pleasure to be here with you, my guy. Hope our fans and listeners enjoy this one. Let us know what you think about the Lakers and Celtics. What should they do this offseason? How will they be better? Will they both be back in the conference finals respectively? Or, will the teams ultimately usurp them? Or do you expect big changes with those teams and rosters with trades or whatever else, or potentially retirements coming along in the case of one LeBron James? So great show, my guy.
I'll tell you this, but Summer League is going to be interesting. I'll tell you that. Yes, Summer League will be very interesting. We'll see who'll be sitting on front row.
Yes.
When the Pistons play the Suns. As always, man, we appreciate you and yours for hopping on board with us this week for the Baseline. Callie, Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys. You know we do. We'll catch up with you next time.